So what are some of the challenges that you've seen franchise companies face as they try to internationalize their brands?
Well, a lot of the time, it's a matter of preparation. They are not prepared properly.
Mm-hmm.
They do not, for instance, look at their trademarks and register them properly in the markets they're interested in. There is no commitment from senior management.
Mm-hmm.
There is no real business planning, and that creates a lot of problems initially.
Mm-hmm. And give us some examples of that, especially on the trademark side. I was recently reading a news story about Michael Jordan and his trademark in China being kind of commandeered by another company. But obviously that happens on a smaller scale, but how do you combat against that kind of thing?
Actually, there are many, many interesting stories in trademarks. For instance, I think one of the most famous ones that people know about is that, for instance, Budweiser. The beer Budweiser, it's an interesting story. We can't get to it right now. But Budweiser can use the name Budweiser anywhere else, but except in the Budweiser region. So, because they never really thought about that. And many stories like the Nova, for instance, just the name, creating the wrong name can also create a problem. Not only not registering the trademarks and having a strategy in registering trademarks, but also having the wrong name and not vetting it culturally.
Right. I was wondering, can you give us some examples of challenges of trademarks that you've worked on overseas?
I have many times we had piracy issues, which we call pirates. They actually register the trademark in their names, and then when the time comes for that company to actually do business in that country, they found out that actually somebody had registered their trademarks, and that happened to many companies that I worked for.
It's almost like squatting on a web domain name or something?
Exactly. Well, in the internet, they have been able to sort of not let people register names. There is an international convention, but international trademark is much more complex because depending on the country, is it first to use or first to register?
Yeah.
If you're in the countries where it's first to register, then you're in trouble. Therefore, that's why you have to have a strategy in registering your trademarks in the targeted country, at least in the first 30 countries you're targeting.
So how do you kind of decide on your branding in another country?
You mean in terms of the name?
Yeah, maybe the name or just maybe how you position yourself. Like I know that, for instance, Church's Chicken is Church's in some countries, but in the Muslim world, I know it's Texas Chicken.
Texas Chicken, and actually you just selected one of the best examples. What you have to do is you have to be culturally sensitive to where you're going. You have to translate culturally your trademarks and your name to make sure that it does not offend the local culture.
Right.
And you have to be flexible, just like churches did. When they found that people did not understand that actually it's a surname, they thought it was a church.
Right.
So they thought, we're not going to sell chicken in people's countries that are Muslim, telling them that they are going to eat chicken in a church. So they decided to call it Texas Chicken. That actually is a very good strategy in really avoiding that pitfall.
Right.
Although I would not have chosen Texas because that's a geographic name that may not be registered in other countries.
Interesting.
Yes.
Wow. So I mean that opens up a whole other can of worms. But what about the perception of how a brand is associated with a particular country? I mean, is the U.S. Do brands kind of try to distance themselves from the U.S. at some points, or does it depend on the market, or how have some other brands navigated that?
I had a reporter call me from the Financial Times, and that was in 2004 when we were introducing Caribou to the Middle East, and the question was the U.S. The Arab sentiment towards the United States foreign policy. How do you enter a market like that and be profitable? Well, paradoxically, it is absolutely amazing that a consumer actually chooses an American brand over a local brand when it comes to having a meal or drinking coffee. But when you ask that same consumer what they think about the US foreign policy. They have a completely different attitude.